Like that is, I think, the definition of the beauty of submission is it's not just an authority, but rather a respect of this person's authority over you. And I think that's the difficult part for our world today. And I think God designed it to be beautiful like that, that women are respecting and falling into submission to the headship and leadership of her husband, who then is going to be judged for how well he leads his family and her and coveting to make her more sanctified. And in order to do that, he has to be submitting to Christ as ruler of his heart to love and take care of her.
All right, welcome back to the Furnished Mind. We are here with Tyler, Shane, Osmond, and Chris. We'll be just talking about some interesting topics that pop up within the Christian and cultural worldview. So you guys go ahead, hit that like and subscribe. All right, so the first question. Um, so obviously last time we discussed like how marriage rates were plummeting in Western nations, specifically in America. And now it seems like there seems to be some sort of like gender wars going on. Some people on YouTube, they call it the manosphere versus feminism or whatever label they may have. Um, but it seems to be another impediment towards healthy relationships. So one thing that's been challenged throughout the whole relationship conversation is the fact that marriage roles, relationship roles, which were traditional, men were the providers, the protectors, the hunter gatherers, and then women took care of the home. They were the nurturers, raised up the children. Um, we're starting to argue that those roles are not interchangeable. That women can now be protectors or providers, and men can also just as equally become the nurturers and the stay-at-home parent. So my first question to you guys is: first, what is the role of the man and the woman in the relationship? And also, are these roles interchangeable? Um, so with that being said, let me start off with Tyler.
All right. Well, the Bible outlines it pretty clearly. Um, Man's role is to protect, right? That's his first and foremost responsibility is to be the protector of his home, and he's supposed to be the leader. So he's supposed to. The way that I kind of look at it is like with a pack of wolves. And I'm not going for a hangover reference here, but wolf pack. The wolf pack, the strongest, actually leads from the back. And he puts great strength up front, and he puts the more vulnerable individuals in the rear. It's not a point of pride. It's not about flexing or having this glory of I am the leader. This belongs to me. Ha ha ha. Right? We're not lording it over anyone, or at least that's not the way it was intended. Um, and I think part of it is part of the reeling against it comes from that idea of toxic masculinity, right? Which it's a real thing, and I give it the air quotes because it's a term that's tossed around so much, and I think often tossed around when it shouldn't be. But God's outlined a man's responsibility to be the protector of his home and to be the leader. Um, I believe that we should be equal partners with our wives, and I also believe that as God directed, we should take everything into consideration and then make the call. For the woman is called to be, well, I guess for the wife is called to be subservient. And as we've seen, the the opening up of marriage to homosexual marriages, um, it's a bit confusing. There's a lot of room for obfuscation of those roles because when you have two men who are married, one of them is going to have to tend one way and the other way, or two women being married, one of them is going to have to tend to the more masculine role and the other to the more feminine role. And I use those words masculine and feminine to describe the way that things have been throughout history. I think there's a good reason that things have been that way throughout history, but with the development of technology and everything, it seems pretty natural that our roles in marriage would be challenged and be no longer as necessary, right? Part of the reason that the man has been the protector naturally occurring is that the man is stronger on just a total mean across all societies throughout the world. The male physique is more conducive to building muscle. We're generally going to be faster, and I'm not trying to hate on women's sports here or anything like that, but I think it's pretty well accepted that men are stronger and faster on average than women are. And of course, there's exceptions. I know girls who could whoop my butt in a race, and I know that there are girls out there who could kick the snot out of me in boxing. Of course, I'd be very embarrassed and humiliated, but as by and large, men are on average stronger and therefore looked to provide strength, leadership, provision. So I think that's kind of where it all comes from. Is history has sort of pitted us in this way, even outside of countries ruled by a following for the God that we know. And I think that it's natural across every society. I'm sure that someone can provide some exception to that, but there's a reason that men have been the leaders of every society that they've been in that I know of. As far as I know, the Amazonian society is nothing but a myth.
Mm.
That's mine. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me pass that to Chris Hale.
It's no coincidence that for millennia, men have been the leader of society, like Tyler was saying. It's been like that for millennia, and it's only recently, within last, I'd say even 50 years, that we've seen this switch in terms of women wanting to usurp men. And it all stems from sin. It all stems from the garden. We can go back in Genesis, even talks about how because of the curse, women want to usurp the role of men. They want to be leaders, and it's just because of sin. God even tells Eve, like, you want to rule over your husband, but your husband is going to end up having to rule and subdue you because of your nature now. And we have just seen that play out, and we're seeing it play out more as the years kind of pass on, where women, it's not about equality like it was with women's suffrage in the 20s. Now we want to be just like men. And in today's age, we want to be men and vice versa. So it's just it really comes down to sin. And even this thing about like a gender pay gap. Women get paid, I think it was like 70 cents per dollar less than men or something like that. And you really have to look at it in terms of, okay, what are some of the jobs that men are doing? Men are working more hours than women. They usually work anywhere from 44 to 46 on average hours a week. Women, anywhere from 36 to 40 hours a week. Same job, more hours. Men are usually ones that are doing the bricklayers, like your boy Peterson talks about.
Yeah.
Men are the guys who are doing the bricklaying. We're doing some of these telephone poles. I've never seen a woman up there fixing telephone poles. It's always been men, for the most part. Garbage, those who collect garbage, it's always been mostly men. So if women are wanting this equality, this 50-50, okay, so women get into the workforce and be bricklayers. Well, they don't want to do that. They want to be corporate. They want to be the CEOs. They don't want to do these manual labor jobs. Why? Because like Tyler was saying, they're not built for it. And that's not a shot at women. It's that men have more of a body who's built for manual labor. That was part of God's decree and the curses, that men are going to have to toil. Work is not going to be pleasurable. It's going to be hard. It's going to be physical by the sweat of our brow. We're going to toil to be fruitful. So men are designed for that kind of labor. Women were always designed for less than the physical labor that men were. For countless years, women have always been the homemakers. They are our children's first teacher. They are designed that way. So I always respect women who tend to be more homemakers over the ones that just want a career. We have women actually in our church in particular that are so focused on their careers that they're not the homemakers that they're designed to be. And in my opinion, according to what scripture says, they are actually living in disobedience to God's word by doing that. And I stand by that 100%.
Let's pass the baton to Osmond.
Boy. What is the role of men in relationships? Are the roles interchangeable, and does modern society encourage traditional roles? So far, Tyler and Chris, I agree with mostly all of what you said. The only one areas that I would caveat is I do think that men and women are unique in their own, and I think that's the biggest thing that our society today is trying to erode. That uniqueness of what makes a woman unique and what makes a man unique is kind of being thrown out the door. Like if it's interchangeable, where men can claim to be women, there's nothing special about women at all. And then women can claim to be men, there's nothing unique about us. I think we're meant to be a complement of each other for each other, not to be the same. And I think that's a lot of in our self-focused society. I think it's just eroded what it like. Even asking the question, "What is a woman today?" gives you so many different answers. And Matt Walsh did a documentary on it, and watching like gender study professor not be able to answer the question, "What is a woman?" is mind blowing,
Right.
because he gave a roundabout, like he's like, what do you think is a woman? It's like, you're the professor teaching on the subject of gender, and you cannot define what a woman is. That's how broken our society is, that we can't even say a woman, what makes a woman. Like even today they're claiming that men can become pregnant. It's like that biologically that makes no sense, but to them it's social constructs are now become scientific facts, which blows my mind, because the faith community have constantly been thrown under the mud for not being scientifically accurate or basing their beliefs on facts. And now those same people are accepting social norms as scientific fact, which just it blows my mind. With that being said, if you're eroding what a woman is, and then even go to the opposite, what is a man? What makes a man a man? If you're eroding those, then of course there's no defined roles in a relationship, and you have to be so open to how the person identifies. It's just it kind of it destructs our most core aspect of family. Like the first thing we learn is mom and dad, and now if those don't have meanings, how does a child distinguish what they are if they don't even know what mom and dad really are? Or even if the parents are like not allowing the child to choose what they are until they're ready to choose. Like I don't want you assigning a gender to my child until my child decides what it is. But you're not even teaching a child what a man and a woman is, because you're not identifying. Pro gender spectrum is eroding everything so that nothing has value or meaning. And it hurts. The sad reality, it hurts women more than it hurts men. Like when a woman identifies as a man and tries to compete, it doesn't hurt the men. She's not going to perform well enough to hurt men's potential at exceeding. But when a man claims to be a woman, it hurts women in sports. They're the ones who get knocked down, whether it's boxing or swimming most recently. That's not fair to those women who competed their whole lives. on equal biological plane as their peers, and all of a sudden the man claims to be a woman, and so, and then as an aspect to the job rate, like the job market, if women, as a pure capitalist, if women were 70 cents on a dollar versus a dollar for a man, I would hire more women. Economically, I'd make more profit. Like why would I hire an employee that costs me a dollar if I can get an employee of the same quality and same value at 70 cents? Like I don't understand. That pay gap, Thomas Sowell breaks it down really well between single men and single women. That gap is very small, and most of the time, women make more money than men. The difference happens with married women and married men, or childbirth. When a woman in the work field gets a child, they have a longing and desire to be with that child and to raise that child, and so they make sacrifices. The same with men who have children; they make certain sacrifices to work horrible jobs that don't have an emotional fulfillment because the pay is really well. And the reality is that women really care about emotional, stable work environment because they care about their mental health more than men do. So they want to be in a workplace where they may not get paid more just to be more comfortable emotionally and mentally. Where men are like, I'm going to put myself in the most dangerous job I can get because it pays really well. So I'm going to be the deadliest catch, or I'm going to be an ice road trucker, or I'm going to work on an oil rig because it's a high income earning job, but it's a high risk. And women are like, we don't want to work in those conditions. It's not. Some do. Some women out there are fully capable of doing those jobs. Good for them. But if we're looking at the majority on average, women choose comfortability versus a high paying job. And then some men make, like everyone makes sacrifices for the careers that they follow. And I think a lot of these individuals are um, they're making assumptions for the masses and saying that and they're looking at data from a very small group set like CEOs and high power jobs and stating that that's because there's sexism or racism or a lack of equality. And the sad reality is most of them it's their job to try and find these flaws, and so they're kind of self-funding their studies. But Thomas Sowell does some great economic research and for multiple decades showing that if anything, there are more women doctors now than ever. There are more female nurses than ever. Women make a higher income as single women than men at some positions. And so the data is in. I think that's the sad reality. And then secondly, I want to see the data of women who now transition to become men and see if their pay increase goes up. If they make a different pay cut, if they make a different pay, because the facts would say no, they're going to make the same amount they did before. There is no gap that exists that people think that it does, and so I think yeah. So it's sad reality where we live in a world today where we can't answer what is a woman, what is a man, and what do the roles in a relationship look like, and what sacrifices are people having to make in order to fulfill that longing and need. And what I would argue from a believer's point of view is they're divinely made for specific roles to play out, and these roles are meant to help each other and to be a complement. And everything in our society is trying to break that down as much as it can. So yeah.
And my man Chang, all you. What is the role of men and women in a relationship? Are these roles interchangeable?
Another weighty, deep topic.
Always.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The way I like to think about it by thinking about equity and equality. Our culture conflates equity with equality. They're not the same thing, you know. We want fairness for all people. We want fairness for both men and women as both image bearers, you know, created in the image of God, both of equal worth and equal value. But that's not to say that what our culture wants to do is to say that no, a man, a woman can do anything a man can do. And they want to, some of you already touched on this, they want to, you know, erode and erase any borders, right? Any distinctions, any differences, because if there are any differences, that's supposed to imply some idea or sense of superiority, you know. I don't think that's the I don't think that's the way that the Bible portrays it or conveys it. And I do think there are hard and fast roles that men have in society and in a family, in a relationship. As some of you have already mentioned, I think God has designed, you know, men to be the caretaker, the provider, the protector. For women, I think women were designed to be nurturers, you know, and um, just this way of being able to be emotionally present and um, the way the way they can care for a child, the way they relate to children differently than men will relate to their own children differently. You know, it's a different kind of relation, just based on the way God designed them. So yes, I do think there are like hardwired differences, you know, between the way men and women relate and how they care for children and yeah, how they live in the world in society. I don't think I don't think they're interchangeable. Um, Now we may not have time to get into it now. I think I think it would be interesting to explore like what are some roles, some gender roles that have been created by Christian subculture, and to really examine them and to see if they really measure up to what the Bible actually portrays. Because I do think we do have beyond this topic of, you know, men and women, beyond this topic, I think we can find like a lot of um cultural things we've adopted, you know, in Christian subculture that we actually look at the evidence. There's really not much support, not much support there, and I think that goes for both men and for women. So that's a topic for another day. But does modern society was a complete question? Does modern
Does modern society encourage traditional roles? And then also, does God?
yes, on the whole, no. Um, Modernism, you know, the zeitgeist of like modern society is to buck against tradition, right? You know, is to reject tradition, and so the answer is no to that. And I think God does. I mean, God designed us, right? God designed us within a objective, concrete, you know, static way, right? That our culture, our society, and this you can trace this all back to the Enlightenment, right? You can, I mean, you could even go back to the garden. You know, you can actually go back to the garden and see man actually questioning, okay, is this really the way I should go? By questioning God, right? That disobedience was a seed for what we see later in civilization. So in that sense, we're designed in a specific way, but our society doesn't want to think that there is concrete, objective reality. Our society wants to say that no, you create your own truth. You're the source of your own truth. That you're this autonomous individual, and you create your own destiny, right? So a lot of that thinking goes back to just the natural rebellion, you know, sin, right, in the human heart. Is this does God really say, right? So in that sense, yes, God has designed the universe. He designed humans, men and women, the family. He has a objective, concrete design in mind, which is the best way. Our society likes to say that, oh, all these rules are just restrictive, they're just oppressive. You know, God designs things in a specific way because it's designed for human flourishing. His vision, his design comports with the way he created us. and it's ultimately for our good, because God knows if we go beyond that, go outside of it, it ultimately leads to destruction. So yeah, that'd be my 2 cents on the topic.
Very, very interesting. Um, and of course, there's also another term that I hear that's challenged a lot, and that's the idea of submission. Um, Whether or not the wife submits to the husband, the husband submits to Christ. That's considered like, you kind of say, the old traditions of yesteryear. Um, just one more sub question: do you guys believe that the term submission is offensive, as how our society likes to label it now? Tyler, let me jump back to you. Is the
All
term
right.
submission offensive?
So I went to a what's it called? Story Slam. It's The Moth. I don't know if you guys ever listen. It's on NPR, and it was this lady telling the story of her children. She was raising who she wanted to be strong, independent young women, and she was reeling against their constant challenges. And she asked her mom, like, I don't know what to do anymore. And the mom told her, look, you need to submit to your husband and submit to God. And she took such great offense to that advice. Our society today does define submission as offensive behavior. It's putting someone else in power over you. And that's been painted to be the worst position that you can be in. To submit to someone means that you accept their power over you. And it rejects that modernist ideology, Chang, that was so beautifully put. The modernism rejects tradition, because that is so encompassing of the idea of progress. We need to shed the old to adopt the new. And that's exactly what that is that idea, that original sin idea, I can be my own God, was originally rejecting submission to God's authority from the garden. And that is still completely part of our nature in today's society. Satan has not changed his antics one bit, just the way he goes about it. And the climate that he's conditioned us to is a climate of fear. The reason that a professor of gender studies cannot identify what a woman is because he's afraid he'll lose his job. And that fear is not without foundation. He's got a strong basis in that belief. And I think for us to say here that we're without fear of these things is not true, because we need to tread carefully, because we all have relationships and opportunities that can be closed to us. If we really stick our foot in our mouth in the wrong way, we can shut off some great things for us easily. And so I'm fearful as well. James, you have this YouTube channel at stake with every video you post, right? And Osman, you've got a great position, and I'm really happy for you. And it's at stake with everything that you say publicly. Your persona is something that can be damaged and is something that is being used against us, that fear. And so what we need to do instead is we need to just invite God into every word that comes out of our mouth, know that we're speaking truth, and know that whatever consequences we suffer, as long as we have been true to God, that's our ultimate purpose, is to pursue truth and love, right? Not to step carefully forward in fear.
What about you, Chris? Is submission offensive?
Submission is from God. It's in God's word. Obviously, everything of God is going to be offensive to society. That's the way of the world at this point. But it's important to note that, especially when we think of 1 Peter 3, when it actually uses the word wives be submissive to husbands, the Greek word is like hyposasso or something like that. And it talks about obviously being subject to being submitting to one's control, but also you have to know that it talks about to yield to one's advice or admonition. So it's not necessarily making yourself a slave to somebody as much as you're subjecting yourself to that person. That is how God has designed the hierarchy of the man and the woman. Society absolutely rejects that uh, completely. Women can be same level as men, if not above. And then, which is just kind of crazy because then you also have society that says, well, what is a woman? What is a man? How do gender is separated from sex. So if that's true and gender is separated, then there really are no roles. It's a free for all, and that's just chaos and confusion and just unlivable worldview. There has to be some type of structure, there has to be some type of order to it, and that's why it's important for us as Christians to make sure that we're modeling the biblical mandate for us. Speaking specifically to Tyler and Osmond, we're married. We have wives. We are to love our wives as Christ loved the church, and that is a sacrificial kind of love. It is in a way, it's a submissive kind of love. We are submissive to certain aspects of our wives, just as wives have to be submissive to certain aspects of their husbands. It's a mutual submission, but different methods of submitting is what I wanted to make a point of. It's a mutual submission of both parties, but just different aspects of submission.
Osmond,
Yeah, Chris, well put. Tyler as well. So for me, the context of Ephesians 5 makes it very clear what submission looks like. And society always goes towards the woman's role in it as a negative, but they don't like quote the husband side of it. So wives, submit to your husbands. Uh, Wives, submit to your own husband as the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body in itself as the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And so that's the part that I think a lot of people don't like share, is that it's a relational hierarchy of Christ is under God, submits to God's will. The church submits to Christ. Husband or wives submit to their husbands. Children submit to their parents. So it's a hierarchy of responsibility and leadership. But the viewpoint of a husband is you're supposed to die to your oneself and to love your wife and to sanctify her. Like that is our role. And if that was more emphasized, that the wife submits to her husband who's dying to himself like Christ died for the church, like that is a beautiful relationship. It's not an abusive, one-sided, you submit absolutely to me and I can be a dictator or an authority over you in the negative aspect. I think our society tends to always jump to the negative connotation of submission. They don't view it as you're submitting to someone who's dying to themselves to love and serve and to sanctify you. Like that type of relationship is a positive, and I don't think it's really pointed out. And in Ephesians, like going to the last sentence in that verse, it says, "However, let each of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband." Like that is, I think, the definition of the beauty of submission is it's not just an authority, but rather a respect of this person's authority over you. And I think that's the difficult part for a world today. And I think God designed it to be beautiful like that. that women are respecting and falling into submission to the headship and leadership of her husband, who then is going to be judged for how well he leads his family and her, and coveting to make her more sanctified. And in order to do that, he has to be submitting to Christ as ruler of his heart, to love and take care of her. Um, and the second part of it, like for me, the beauty of it, my wife is the daughter of the king, and so I have to treat and love her well. Like her father is a king in that sense, and so I have to treat her as such. And so in that, I'm submitting to his care and love for her. It's not an authoritarian relationship. I don't subject my wife to like evil will intent in my heart. Like to be submitting to Christ is the seeking and purifying of my heart and seeing my sinful nature and wanting to confront that to live a more holy life. And within that is the constant care of my wife, is to recognize I'm sinful, I need him, and I need him to help me love her well. It's not, and through that is a beautiful relationship that I think the world doesn't understand, because immediately they think of submission as being absolute evil. Like no one should be submitted to anyone. That's like, and history gives us great examples of how sinful we can be when we have the ability to control other people's lives. Like, and I understand that, but if you look at it from a biblical point of view, submission actually is a beautiful thing, not an evil thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo what all the guys have said before me. I think I was actually going to bring up Ephesians 5. So Chris, you're way ahead of me. And then Osman touching up on that. So yeah, I completely agree with what you guys said about that. I think often the negative reaction to the idea of submission, I mean, it doesn't come out of a vacuum, right? Like there has been a long history of power and leadership and authority being used in an abusive and oppressive way, and sadly, not just in a secular political context, but even in the context of church, Christianity. I mean, so so I know that can be a raw, visceral kind of reaction, and it doesn't come from a vacuum. There is, to be fair, there is some precedent for people being suspicious of that idea of submission. But if we look at the way of Jesus, if you look at the Bible, Jesus, he brought forth this upside down kingdom where the greatness is not measured by your ability to lord power and authority over others. It's by actually serving others. The greatest is the one who serves. And like Chris and Osman, have you guys have touched on loving your wife, selflessly, sacrificially, and um, I mean, men were created as leaders, and when the way God created us is used in a destructive, like sinful way, I mean, who are the people that suffer, who take the brunt of the suffering? It's women and children, right? And they're the more vulnerable units, of our society, of the family, and so it's a heavy responsibility that God gives men to lead, and to serve and to protect. And but if we reorient to redirect our eyes to what submission should look like in a proper godly, kingdom of God kind of way, as opposed to the way that power looks like in the world, then that transforms our perception, and so um yeah, we look at Jesus and look at the way that he related to us. He emptied himself, Philippians 2, right? He emptied himself of his divinity, of all of his heavenly glory, and to humble himself to become a man, and to die. That's the ultimate example of humility there. So we need to ask, okay, well, what's the context? What are we submitting to? And what is the framework, where we're analyzing submission? I think those are key questions we need to ask.